Welcome to Commander Central, episode 145, and today we're going to talk the binary of EDH. In other words, the 0 and 1 drops that are good at any point in the game. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Gentlemen, how's it going today?
Pretty good.
You guys feeling all right?
Yeah,
It's autumn here in Wisconsin, at least it feels like it finally.
I know.
Finally.
Leaves are turning, football's being played.
Hockey starts next week. Or
Yeah.
actually, hockey starts in like 2 days after this airs.
On the Wednesday after the show goes
I think
live?
the Ducks' first game is October 3rd, which would be the Thursday show when the Dex
Nice.
You Play comes out that day.
I know football season is in full swing, but I have no idea what's going on. I have not.
Packers are 3-0.
Oh, there
And
we
they
go.
play tonight.
Excellent. I have
So
not.
let's wrap this up.
All right. That's
All 0 and 1 drops are good, and we'll see you next
going to
week.
be a 12-minute show. Max didn't get to play any games this week.
Still hunting down the vaults in Borderlands.
All right. Next week, you better be back.
No promises.
All right. Chris, how you doing? Play any fun games or anything? How's
No,
your
I've been
modern...
sick all week.
You sound like it a little bit still.
Yeah, so Sunday, I wasn't going to go to D&D. The guys convinced me to go, and I felt like crap the whole night. Whatever. Monday morning, I wake up, take my kid to school, get home, and immediately hurl. I'm like, okay, this is how this week's going to go, and that's how my week's been.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun at all. I got the flu shot on Tuesday morning when we play on Tuesday night, and then I felt that, like I said, I always get a sore throat from it, and then I felt that all night when I was playing, and I was cranky, and I'm like, and I was trying not to be cranky to people, but like, man, that was a fight because I was just feeling owly, and I wanted to just be snappy.
Ugh.
And then I got hit at one point, I think in the first game too, we got hit with a Sire of Stagnation, which everyone discards, I think, right at the end
Sire of Insanity.
Sire of Insanity.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, in stagnation's the Eldrazi
That's right, yep. Sire of Insanity, that's what everyone discards at the end of turn.
of every player's turn.
Of every player's turn, right. And it wasn't one that was maybe cast at the point in the game when that player was going to win. It was a little chaotic, which I don't necessarily love.
Was it in a chainer deck?
It was in a chainer deck.
Then it's fine.
And there's a logic to it. I get it. When you're playing a chainer deck, you have reanimation stuff. Like, it wasn't like it was just randomly in a deck. But it's also one of those things that still does cause a lot of chaos. And when you're behind, you don't necessarily... Like, I don't think chainer was in play when it happened.
Oh, okay.
And one person had a ginormous board state. So I felt like all you've done is made everyone pitch their possible answers to the giant board state. And that person wound up winning anyway. Like, they were probably gonna win, so I don't know if it like stopped. Like, I didn't have an answer in hand necessarily, so I just don't like the chaos of that card. I feel like it just, you don't know what's gonna happen then, and it tends to slow up games too.
I love the card.
Do you?
I know you do.
Oh, I love it.
I get it in a chainer
Reminds me
deck.
of the Legacy days.
And you're right. It does make a lot more sense in that deck for sure.
Because worst case, you draw your card for turn and pitch it and cast something you pitched with your last hand.
And if you're at 1 or 2 cards because you're playing that style deck too, it hurts you way less than everybody else.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of that wheel thing. It's kind of the opposite of the Wheel of Fortune when like you cast Wheel of Fortune when you're at 0 and you draw 6. That's great, but you also don't know what you just put in someone else's graveyard, what you just gave them for cards. It's kind of the same thing. It's not quite as chaotic, but it can bite you.
Reminds me of a game I played a couple weeks ago where a guy played the blue wheel.
Which one?
Windfall?
Windfall. Yeah. I couldn't think of it. I knew it's a Wheel of Fortune in blue.
Okay.
Pretty much. And pitched all the cards, and then I had my buddy with, and he's like, I'll cast my commander. And he reads the commander, he's like, oh, she does it from the graveyard too. He's playing Bruno Light of Alabaster.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
like,
right, exactly.
And I'm laughing the whole time because I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah, like in my Glissa deck, I'm like, I'll throw these 3 artifacts in my library, just get in my graveyard and just get them back the second something dies.
Ooh.
So yeah, you can get bit. But anyway, it was also probably because I was cranky because I was like feeling the aftereffect of the flu shot. So I told Max this game, and I'm going to mention it to Chris, and then there's a incorrect resolution thing at the end that I'll also explain. But I was playing my Vela deck. There was a Shattergang Brothers deck that was Goblins and a Rowan and Will Super Friends deck, and I think a Jirad deck was the 4th one, but hadn't really done much. Rowan and Will had kicked off at least once, and I was able to dig down and find an Elder Spell and kill all the Planeswalkers, but he rebuilt pretty quickly and was about to go off again. However, I had put a Treasure Cruise down and killed enough stuff, and then like the Goblin deck sacks Goblins, and I had like gotten enough treasure up on Treasure Cruise that I was close to winning too.
Do you mean Revel and Riches?
Excuse me, Revel and Riches, not
Okay.
Treasure Cruise. It has treasures.
It does.
And I had worked the Rowan and Will player down to 2 life when the Shattergang Brothers player passed to Rowan and Will, who was going to untap and probably ult off a couple planeswalkers and regain some life, and that would have been an ugly situation. Shattergang Brothers sacrificed a creature because Rowan and Will had 1 creature in play and it could proliferate planeswalkers up, which made me have to sacrifice 2, which was going to knock the Rowan and Will player down to 1 from the Vela trigger. So in response to that, I went to Pongify another creature of mine to give me a second Vela trigger to kill Rowan and Will.
Yep.
Okay.
He responded with Narcissus Reversal on my Pongify, and then went to target Vela with the copied Pongify off Narcissus Reversal, which would kill Vela first, taking him to 1, but then Vela wouldn't be there when the Shattergang Brothers trigger resolved. At which point, Shattergang Brothers sacrificed an enchantment then to force me to sacrifice my treasure, or my Revel in Riches, which is the only enchantment out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a reality shift in play, and then reality shifted my original creature that was going to be hit with Pongify. So the stack was like 8 or 10 triggers deep. When it finally resolved, the reality shift went off, got rid of the creature, then the copied Pongify went off, which was the second Vela trigger, which killed the Rowan and Will player. And we assumed as he left the game, that ended the turn, which would clear the stack. And the Rowan and Will player has no one to blame from him but himself, as he's a judge, which passed the turn to me, and Revel and Riches won the game. But it didn't. It wouldn't have cleared the stack, so I wouldn't have gotten the win.
No.
You continued to play out the turn, at least in terms of what's going on. So it would have made me sacrifice Revel and Riches, came back to me, and then we would have continued on in the game. So I won it, but I didn't win it, because when we looked at the rule later on.
I think you have to resolve all spells off the stack before.
Yep. And he even said, he's like, nope, I think the stack clears when I lose the game. So I go, all right, cool, I win. Because it passes to me, I was next, passes to me with 10 treasures on my Revel and Riches, and I win.
Yeah, I think that's a weird ruling when it's multiplayer, because in 1v1, if the stack's 30 things deep and I bolt you and kill you, the game's over.
Right. And I think that was what his thought process was. But for anyone who's curious, it's actually Rule 800.41 where that is, and it says, if a player leaves the game during their turn, that turn continues to its completion without an active player. If the active player would receive priority, instead the next player in turn order receives priority, or the top object on the stack resolves, or the phase or steps end, whichever is appropriate.
Yep.
So that was an interesting multiplayer thing we didn't know. So I'm still gonna take the win, but I wouldn't have won had we been aware of that.
So this is my Tuesday night. I stayed home, played Borderlands. That's what I've been doing constantly. And I'm,
I
Dana.
see Derek's higher level than you, though.
That's fine. Whatever.
I might stalk you when I'm on my PlayStation.
Yeah, I know you do. As you creep through my blinds, I can see you. Dana does his year of EDH on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I'm playing Borderlands, checking Twitter, cool, let's see how games are going. And I see nothing from Dana. I'm like, what? I'm pretty sure he went to the shop tonight, so I message him, I Slack him, I'm like, did you not play tonight, ? And so my roommate gets home. I'm like, was Dana at the shop? He goes, yeah, why? I'm like, he didn't put anything on Twitter, so I'm kind of worried he's dead.
And that was in part because I was just not feeling good. I wrote all the games down, and then I posted them when I got home just in one door, but I didn't do it as games went because I was just feeling ornery. So I didn't do it till afterwards.
Right. Good news is, though, I have started to sketch out my Morphon Humans deck.
Okay.
I'm about 38 cards in.
The lands?
No, there's lands and some spells. There's only 26 lands so far. I think I'll be fine with that much.
I keep giving him more and more he needs to add.
So hopefully when I do return to EDH night, I will have a brand new deck.
Nice.
To run rampant over everybody except Chris, because we're secret partners.
All right, nice. So that's next Tuesday?
No, not at all.
All right. Good to know.
I have majority of those cards you need, though.
Although, I joked with a buddy today in a chat. I'm like, maybe I should just buy a copy of every legal human in EDH and then just randomly shuffle 50 creatures into my deck every time I play it.
Well, I played against a deck like that in Vegas, and I can't remember who it was.
We've had a few listeners in our Slack that say we've done this. We keep our lands and our commanders separate, and then we have a pile of 180 cards, and we shuffle them all together, and then we deal out the other
Yeah, well,
you know, 62 cards you need,
and in this case,
and that's your deck.
In this case, it was, I think he had like 60 creatures shuffled for the deck, and the deck had slots for 30 creatures. So before the game, you'd pull the creatures aside, shuffle them all up, and like throw 30 random ones out of that stack into that one deck. Man, I'll have to look up and see who that was. But yeah, I'll post it on on Twitter after this airs so we can give him credit. But I can't remember who it is. I'll have to look back through my notes. But if you want to reach out to us and find us on the interwebs and let us know about any games you played that were fun, how would you do that, Chris?
You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can Facebook search us CMDR Central. YouTube search us CMDR Central and find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
We're also over at patreon.com. Search CMDR Central for if you're able to contribute financially to the show. We greatly appreciate it. You get entry into our Slack to talk to us and other listeners.
Yeah.
You know, we may not have, you know, there's a long line for these Decks You Play shows, but we have an entire chat dedicated to, hey, look at my deck and help me fix it or make it better.
And like it's actively, there's a lot of people posting over the course of the day. If you want help with the deck, there's a lot of helpful people in there.
The entire afternoon has been about Alayla.
Yeah.
In that chat. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. Not my jam, but I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of really clever people making good EDH posts in there. And it's just a fun.
It's a fun. We're there. I mean, we talk about not just Magic stuff, just real life stuff, Avengers stuff a few months ago.
It is worth your $2, and we would appreciate the support as well.
I found like 6 other people to play Borderlands with because of this chat.
Nice. There you go. I've actually got at least 2 or 3 Pokemon Go friends out of there.
There you go.
So it's not quite as cool as Borderlands, but Gen 5 is out.
It is.
You been playing, Chris?
Yeah.
All right, let's not get sidetracked.
Did you go downtown with Austin like 3 days ago?
No.
Okay.
He didn't invite me. I've been sick all week too.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't remember what day that was. I came home from work. I'm like, where are you? He goes, I'm playing Pokemon. Go downtown. I'll be home in like an hour. I'm like, okay, have fun. Not my jam.
You can also find us on flipsidegaming.com.
Yeah, use promo code CMDR in all caps to get 10% off all orders, $10 or more. So that means Throne of Eldraine, random standard singles, or any other TCG games they might sell, like Pokemon, or accessories like playmats and deck boxes.
Excellent. All right. We have a couple contests that are wrapping up here, end of the month.
Yeah, for Twitter, we are giving away the 5 Team Planeswalker bracelets from GP Vegas that we picked up from the Command Zone. Mm-hmm. We're giving 1 bracelet away to 5 different recipients, so you all get 1.
Yep.
It'll be randomly distributed. Sorry, I'm not going to ask you which one you want, just because that's going to be a nightmare, because if you all want the same one,
right? Yeah.
We only got 1. So find that tweet, retweet it, and follow us, and you'll be entered to win that. For Patreon, if you support us, if you start to support us, or continue to support us through the end of the month, you'll be entered in to win the Ultimate Guard Mountain Playmat.
Very cool. And we might as well announce the next month's contest, because it is going to begin on next week's show.
Yeah, so we're announcing the Patreon contest today. Next week's show on Monday will be another live build that all 3 of us are going to do on when we record. We're going to build a Sir Gwen, let me get the full name, Sir Gwen, Hero of Ashvale EDH deck. We're going to keep this at like a budget of like $200 to $250.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
We're going to build that deck on our show, because that went really well when we did Rolesk.
Yeah, that was
back
fun.
for War of the Spark, I think, or Ravnica Allegiance.
Yeah.
Whichever one it was. So we're going to do that again, and as long as you are a Patreon supporter by the end of October, we're going to give that deck away in a nice wooden deck box as well.
Oh, nice. Excellent. I was not even aware of the deck box thing. Cool. All right.
Yeah, it's in the collection of stuff to give away.
All right.
And then we'll announce the Twitter contest next week, because we haven't finalized that yet.
That'll be fun. That was a fun show to do the first time. I want to do it again. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I guess while we're on the topic, we still have that Patreon stretch goal. If we hit 200 Patreon supporters for like 1 or 2 consecutive months, we'll do another live deck build.
Yep.
We'll put a poll out to our patrons. They'll pick the commander.
Yeah.
And that deck will have a budget of $400. So it's a bigger deck. We'll build it, and then one of our patron supporters will win that deck that we build.
Mana Crypt in all lands.
Right.
Ashwin the Pilgrim.
Yep. Mono red Ashling with the Mana Crypt. There you go. Chris, you're an excellent brewer.
I saw something on, not to get on a tangent here, but I saw something on Twitter, I think today or last night, said, I'm going to give you $500 to build an EDH deck. What are you going to do with it? And someone said, Ashwin and 99 Mountains, and I'm going to go drink with the rest. I'm like, and I liked it like 9,000 times.
There you go. That's a thinking man's brew right there. Okay, let's talk about the 0 and 1 drops in Commander. And the first thing I'm going to briefly touch on here is talk about mana curve. And I will just use a brief definition that Gavin Verhey provided in an article he wrote in May of 2017. It said, mana curve is the idea that you have a curve of mana costs. You draw more cards as the game goes on, meaning you generally need more copies of cards that cost less and fewer copies of cards that cost more. You don't want a bunch of expensive cards in your hand. That doesn't entirely apply to EDH. Number one, you don't have multiple copies of cards. Games tend to go on longer. You have more ramp than most other formats. But you still don't want to be like carrying all 6 drops in your deck, because that means the first 5 turns of the game you can't really do anything. And you also don't want to have, for the most part, all 1 or 2 drops in your deck, because then on turn 7 or 8, when you have a ton of mana, you also maybe can't do enough. However, those 0 and 1 drops are really nice to pepper into your deck, both to give you something to do in those first couple of turns, and in those later turns when you want to do multiple things sometimes, either because you just want the extra value of having multiple things out, or because you want to get extra triggers, whatever. There's a lot of reasons to bake in some of those small cards in your deck, particularly ones that are useful at any point throughout the game. So we're going to talk about those cards. First things first, briefly, we're not going to go into much detail on like the really strong mana rocks that are super cheap: Soul Ring, Mana Vault, Crypt, Mox Opal, Mox Diamond, and Chrome Mox, because they're obviously really, really good. And aside from Soul Ring, they're really, really expensive. And there's just nothing really useful to say. People run those if you're playing at that kind of a power level or speed level, and if you're not, you don't. No one really doesn't understand what they do, or no one doesn't understand how powerful they are. So we're just going to kind of skip right past those and talk about some other 0 and 1 drops that are really good at most points of the game.
Most points, okay.
First things first, I kind of grouped a few of these up into semi-logical clusters here. We'll talk about cantrips first, which are like the 0 and 1 drop spells. They're mostly 1 drops that, draw a card, discard a card, or let you dig down and put one into your hand, looking at like Brainstorm here, or Ponder, or Ancient Stirrings. Chris played, there's like a 1v1 competitive scene in our store that you play a little bit of, and that's not dissimilar to CEDH in a lot of ways. If you're playing blue, most of those decks I've seen run every cantrip they can, because you're just trying to dig down to find that combo piece, or find that game-winning card. So you're just spell into spell into spell to see how far you can dig in a single turn to find that one thing, or the tutor for the thing, whatever it is. In regular EDH, you don't see that much of that, but you see some of it. Like, cantrips are still pretty useful. Are there any of those you guys like or favor or tend to run in decks?
Faithless Looting. It's literally like the only 1-drop cantrip that I run. I
will 100% agree with that. When I play red, I play Faithless Looting just because of the flashback, mainly. I don't like Brainstorm or Ponder in my blue decks, because I'd rather pay 1 more mana or 2 more mana for a consistent draw 2 or 3.
Sure.
Just knowing that I want the cards versus selection, especially early game and especially late game.
There's the added gas, like using Chris's Alesha deck, for example. You're not even really losing anything, because you're probably going to put something in your graveyard that you're going to hit with Alesha. In some cases, you want the discard. You definitely did in Modern in a lot of those decks, but like in Commander too, you sometimes want the discard. That's not a bad thing.
Oh, I don't mind pitching anything in Commander. I mean, if I throw whatever in the graveyard, it doesn't matter in the early game to me.
I actually ran Faithless Looting in that Varchild deck of mine that I just stopped, and I actually didn't like it in that deck. I wanted cards in hand. I wanted impulse draw more than I wanted to, because there was never an answer I was particularly looking for. I just wanted bulk cards in my hand, and that doesn't help with that. So like I ran Act on Impulse, and I ran a couple cards like that like until end of turn you can cast these spells, and that was more useful to me. I also had no graveyard interaction.
Yep.
But 95% of the time, Faithless Looting is a great, great card at almost any point in the game. And it's also one of those cards that will help you find, like, it's turn, you kept a 2-lander or something, and you're like, oh, odds are I will draw a land or something. And then you don't, but you hit Faithless Looting. Like, okay, well, I'll probably hit a land off this. Like that a lot of
then you
times
don't.
gets you there too. Sometimes you don't too, but like
I've totally had that happen.
that's what Ponder's really nice for too. Ponder helps you find those.
Yeah.
But I tend to agree. Like I usually don't run many of these cantrips unless there's extra utility. I run them in obviously Talrand because they make me drakes. I still have one brainstorm in my Sphinx deck, and I probably should take it out. It's just too easy to get locked unless you're running a ton of shuffle effects.
Right. I think besides your Talrand deck, the decks that kind of want this are like that new Sphinx from Core 20 that as long as you have X amount of different cards with different names in your hand, when
Sure.
it hits you, that player loses the game. That's giving you card selection, whatnot. Those help both early game to get you to the board state you need and the end game where you want to win.
Or if you're playing like Yannette, say, or Jaleva, where you care about what's in the top of your library, it gives you a way to set that up. You can't jump down, find the land hit you need, and then put something big on top so you can hit it off Jaleva next turn or hit it off Yannette or something next turn. So there's added utility, but I think you need to have the added utility for the most part in Commander because you generally can't shuffle away that brainstorm. But there's a lot of decks that get a lot of extra use out of those too. So they are really good for filling holes. But I have the exact same note here, Max. I tend to want to just pay one more mana for like a Night's Whisper or a Chart of Course and just draw 2 cards
Yeah.
than I do just trying to dig down. But I think that's a play style thing, I think, for a lot of people as well.
Oh, for sure.
How about the eggs cards that are kind of like Urza's Bauble or Chromatic Star? Because Chromatic Star is an absolute player in Modern, Chris.
Oh, that's an understatement.
I mean, that's a legit card, but I think for the most part, again, in Commander, these are things you tend to play in decks that have added utility. I run 2 Baubles in my Glissa deck because it's a free card draw and I can recur it. Joyra, it's just a free card. It's like the 0 drops are just a free card draw. A lot of times you see them in Brea decks where there's extra utility, or even I'm guessing an Urza Commander deck probably runs quite a few of them. Are there any of those you guys yourselves run in decks?
Not specifically like artifacts. Just
Okay.
because I don't have an artifact-centric deck like your
Sure.
Glissa deck. I don't have anything that, an Urza's Bauble in any of my decks is just going to be a use it and I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, if you can abuse it like in Glissa or maybe like any other artifact deck, maybe it's worth it. But
Or you're doing a Storm thing, maybe
Right.
even because it's a free 0
the
drop.
paradoxical outcomes, shenanigans.
But it's a whole different thing in Commander where you have one paradoxical outcome,
Right.
and it's 100 cards to find it. Versus
And it's on the
60.
bottom of your library.
right? Because that's where it will be
Oh,
absolutely.
all the time. Every time.
So there are some weird ones that kind of get played this way too, like Everflowing Chalice technically is a 0 drop, and I've cast it for 0 in my Vela deck just to have one more artifact out. If I'm doing the math and I'm like, okay, if I play this for 0 right now and then I plus this Tezzeret, I can hit that 1 extra damage, and then when I swing through with this, it's going to be, this creature's that much bigger that cares about this Karn token or something. Like, there are times that can be useful. I've seen Hangerbacks cast for 0 before, just to get a death trigger.
I've seen that too in Modern.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
I was going to say it sounds stupid.
But there are times that makes a difference. The flexibility of those is pretty useful to cast as a 0 drop late sometimes. Like, I wouldn't say run Hangerback Walker to have that option, but that's one of the many things about Hangerback option that's useful.
See, granted that is technically a 0 drop. I just totally omitted it from like my mental
Yeah.
search. Like, I always have to pay 2 for that. Like, it's just a 2 drop in all of my decks I run
Yeah.
it in because I'm not using that for the death trigger. I want to build it up and make the tokens.
All right, so let's get now to this next category. I think I'm kind of ramping up into things you see and that are useful here. Conditional mana, things that either make mana, once in a while, like a Lotus Petal or a Lotus Blossom, or rituals. Whether it's Dark Ritual, I think High Tide would qualify. It's a 1 mana, doubles all your lands. Bubbling Muck, your swamps make an extra 1, although that one's sorcery speed, but High Tide's usually on your own turn anyway. How about those? Are any of those you guys run in decks or really tend to like a lot?
You know what's really sad about that is I own every single one of them and I do not play them in Commander.
You don't play mono blue. Well, you don't have mono blue. I think you tend to have to be playing a mono deck to take advantage of those. Again, in like a legacy deck where you're playing High Tide, you have the dual lands because it doesn't say basic, it just says island. Whereas in Commander, you just, best case in allied colors, you have 4 lands, 4 dual lands that have the type, and in enemy colors, you only have 2. If you can even afford the blue duels or, shoot the bad duels still $100 for the AUR duel. It's like the best case scenario is pretty, is not nearly as good outside of mono color. But in a mono color deck, High Tide is a legit card. Like in mono blue, I would be hard pressed to not run High Tide in a blue deck.
I guess it's also going to depend on how you're playing that blue deck, though.
Yeah, but even so, just like being able to turn that, you're on turn 5 and you have 5 lands out, and you go from 5 mana to 8 mana. That can make a really big difference. And if it's later in the game than that, that can be a huge difference.
True.
Like, I'm always scared when I see someone cast High Tide. I'm like, oh no, this isn't going to be good.
Another dirty combo player.
Scumbags unite!
I ran Bubbling Monk and Mono Black. I don't have Mono Black deck right now, but I did run that. Are there any other things like that you guys run? The Mana Burst ones?
Nope.
Any Lotus Petals from either of you guys?
Nope.
I do have one in my Edric deck.
That makes sense.
I do run Lotus Petal.
It's a competitive deck. You need to be fast. You want Edric out on turn 1, turn 2.
As fast as I can get him out usually.
You can.
So I do run Lotus Petal there. That's the only one, though. So how about value creatures that are cheap here? Because there's a lot of them. Usually people think of mana dorks, but there's plenty of other ones out here that are just 1 or 2 drops. Are there any favorites that you guys have in your decks?
I love Soul Warden and Soul's Attendant.
You have those in your RNK?
I have them in RNK. I think they're great early game because everybody likes to play their little creatures. Yep. Cool, I gain a couple life every turn pass of the table, but
I've seen you gain 30 life off those because
nobody takes care of them.
Well, because no one wants to blow a Swords to Plowshares on that when you're like, what else is going to come down next turn? And I've seen you gain legitimately 30 life off one of those.
And even like in the late game.
That's why you play Lightning Bolt. You don't care.
I guess, yeah.
Even in the late game, though, dropping those, I don't feel bad because if I've removed your commander enough and your commander is your only play, I'm still gaining 1 life off of you spending 10 mana to recast your commander for the 8th time or 9th time. Where something similar like Birds of Paradise, I don't want to see that on turn 10.
Yeah.
Unless an Armageddon was cast or something. But
well, you're in the RNK deck too, like if that Soul's Attendant, if you no longer care about the life gain,
Krov's gonna eat it.
You just sacrifice it, right?
Krov is gonna eat it.
Like there's a lot of added utility on those there as well. Any 0/1 drop creatures you were a fan of running in decks, Chris?
Probably the only one that I really run going through my deck list has to be Hope of Gearper. I think it's the only one that I run, and I run it in Alesha.
Okay. You can sacrifice and recur it. I mean, you kind of soft lock somebody if you want to.
Have you ever hard locked a Planeswalker player out of the game?
Yeah.
I have.
And see, when you asked Chris that question, I went straight to Modern and was like, Goblin,
Yeah, I was
Burn, Monastery, Swiftspear.
Yeah, I could have done that too, but this is strictly EDH,
True.
and there's only one creature out of my deck list that I play that's a 1-drop.
I mean, Swiftspear is a legit creature in EDH.
Yeah.
Is Delver's a 1-drop, right?
Delver is
Delver's
1-drop.
I've seen Delver in EDH decks before. I do have a Hope of Gearper in a deck. And I mean, that's just accidentally a really useful thing. And when I've had it sacrificed against me, that's annoying. I'm like, ugh, come on. One of my favorite 1-drop creatures that's like not a mana dork, Hex Parasite is a card I am a huge fan of. I've killed so many Planeswalkers with Hex Parasite. And, you know, this isn't a reason to run it, but like I've knocked myself off the throne with it before. When someone's like, well, what's everyone's life at? I'm like, I'm at 36 and everyone else is at 30. And the person has no counters in their creatures. I'm like, I'm going to activate Hex Parasite 3 times and take myself to 30 so you're now the one on the throne and you can't put counters in your creatures. I've done that at least one time. Yeah. And this was last summer. I was playing against, we have a Selenia, I think it's Selenia, a life swap deck in the store. And I wasn't even paying attention, but I had my Hex Parasite out when he was going to do some life swap stuff. And he's like, well, I guess I can't target you. And I was like, yeah, you can't. And it took me like, literally it was 3 turns later. I'm like, oh, because Hex Parasite. Like I didn't even make the connection about why he said that. But so again, those aren't reasons to run it, but that's a really, really useful card.
But you have to be in black. I wish you didn't have to be
That
in
is
black.
the
I
one
know.
downside, and that's probably part of the reason it doesn't see a lot of play, is because you have to be in something black to utilize it. But I mean, like, I've taken a ton of counters off things like the Antiquities War to just get that look at the top 5 cards of your library, put an artifact in the hand. That's worth me paying either 2 mana to do or 2 life and a mana, take a counter off that 4 or 5 turns in a row.
Yep.
And everyone starts going, why is that Antiquities War still there? And I'm like, get rid of the Hex Parasite. It ceases to be a problem. And then everyone's like, but I don't want to remove your Hex Parasite because it feels bad removing a 1-mana creature. Any other ones from you guys that you like to play aside from some of the mana dorks?
No.
I don't even really play mana dorks neither.
I really don't for the most. We've discussed this before.
We discussed it last week on the
Yeah.
Galta show.
I would rather have mana things that stay in play, and we tend to not play. We're not playing for speed necessarily either, where we like want to jam out something for the most part giant on turn 4. I would rather again take the safe route and put a land ramp spell or an artifact or something. A mana dork has to have some added utility as far as I'm concerned for me to play it in a deck. So I tend to not run a ton of them either, but I don't think mana dorks are bad necessarily. There's worse things, particularly in an elf deck where you get a ton of extra synergy. It's not Llanowar Elf. That isn't a bad play in turn 9 when you have a bunch of things that buff elves in play.
Yep.
Yeah.
So a lot of those have extra synergy there. Do you still have your Sarah Ascendant in your
Okay, that is
Dromoka deck?
Yeah, I do.
That's your one?
Because it's a 6/6 for 1 on turn 1. I like
Yeah.
that a lot.
I almost killed Max with one
You did.
and threatened him the whole time. Like, I'm going to get there with just this one creature.
Well, but again, like in that Dromoka deck where you gain a lot of life, I've seen you drop that on turn 10 and you're still over.
Over the 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just in general. I mean, I've almost died to Sarah Ascendants before that someone else has just dropped on turn 1 and you're like, ooh, I have no way to deal with this for 4 turns.
I just want 4 of them.
Just look quiet so no one swings at me. Don't be a threat. Don't drop. I'm not dropping that turn 1 Soul Ring now. When the turn 1 player goes plain Sarah Ascendant, pass a turn, and I'm gonna look at my hand. I'm like, I'm gonna do this. I'm like, nope, I'm doing none of that. Land pass.
And I will still kill you,
I am not gonna be the threat.
you sandbagger.
I absolutely am a sandbagger. I for sure do that. Well, I was just having this conversation with somebody when Command Zone did that show last year and some of the stats, and one of the things they looked at was turn 1 Soul Rings. People who play turn 1 Soul Ring don't win. Like their win rate was like 23% or something, which is less in a 4-player game. That's less than you should win. So their conclusion was turn 1 Soul Rings generate threat in a way that doesn't help you win. Ignoring the problems with those stats, maybe you shouldn't play your Soul Ring on turn 1 if you're just trying to be like turn 1 Soul Ring pass. I hold back turn 1 Soul Rings all the time. If I don't have a real legit use for it, I would absolutely rather drop it on turn 3 when nobody cares than on turn 1 when everyone goes, ooh, guess who's the target?
I want to live the dream of land, Soul Ring, Hanger Backwalker. For
There
1.
you go.
I've done Land, Soul Ring,
Signet.
Sword of the Animist.
Nice.
The best one I ever had, and this was right after Drownyard Temple came out, and I still had Mox Diamond. I was playing in my Glissa deck, and I opened Soul Ring into, I think it was Mind Stone, played a Mox Diamond pitching a Drownyard Temple, and then had enough mana from the Mox Diamond and Soul Ring to bring the Drownyard Temple back from my graveyard into play tapped. And emptied my hand out basically doing that, and then hit no card draw, and I died I died for doing that, and it was absolutely worth it because it was. But that's a perfect example of you're going to put a giant bullseye on you for that kind of flex. There's a couple of good land fetch artifacts. Wayfarer's Bauble and Expedition Map especially are the two that people tend to play. Horizon Spellbomb's out there. How about those?
I run X-Map in at least one of my decks. It's in my R&K deck just so I can go grab Urborg or Cabal Coffers. I used to run it in like Dromoka to go get Nykthos or Hall of the Bandit Lord, but it just felt too slow early game because I wanted the colored mana versus the haste enabler or the big mana producer.
How about Wayfarer's Bauble? Do you have that in any of your decks?
No.
I went through and looked at my decks tonight. if I'm not playing green,
You have it.
I have Wayfarer's Bauble in the deck. And if I have Cabal Coffers, which is in one deck, I have or something like equally scary, I have a Expedition map. If there's if I'm not in green where I have other ways to go get it.
That makes sense.
There is some graveyard hate. Artifacts tend to be 0 or 1 drops. Tormod's Crypt, Relic of Progenitus, Nihil Spellbomb. Any of those on the list of cards you guys tend to play?
I play Relic.
You play Relic? Do you have a reason why you like Relic over, say, Crypt?
Draw a card.
Because it replaces itself.
Yep.
It costs the 1 more mana to activate, but...
Yep, I've played Relic in the past. Same reason, it just draws you a card.
And you can get the turn 1 Relic, and when you look at the commanders, you can tell if someone's playing a graveyard-themed deck.
And you can stay ahead of them.
And you can just keep doing it until they get way ahead of you, and they're just like, well, you know what? Get rid of all of it.
And then you pop it. And if they don't, and if somebody else Bajuka bogs them, then you still have your Relic there, and you can start hitting somebody else or something. Yeah, I went through and looked also. I have at least one artifact, graveyard removal artifact in all my decks. And it's usually Relic, but I have a couple of Nihil Spellbombs in decks too, if I'm playing black, because it gives you the option to also...
Pay a black to draw the card.
Pay a black to draw a card, although it takes 2 to activate, I believe.
Yeah.
No, is it just tap to activate? It's just tap to do it?
Yep.
And the black to draw a card?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, that is a really good one too. I actually had Relic in a couple of decks, and at some point I'm like, why don't I just run Spellbomb, because I can pay 1 to...
Yeah, definitely. If you're in black, it's not bad.
So, and you can hit a person like Relic hits everybody.
Yep.
Spellbomb targets. So I guess it depends on whether or not you want to hit all graveyards. I think I tend to run Spellbomb in my black decks because those are decks that tend to want to touch its own graveyard. But I don't think you're wrong either way.
No, I play Relic and Mogus, so I could care less about my graveyard. I'm just like, exile everything.
I run Scavenger Grounds and great decks that have their own graveyard too, just because I'm like, if I'm going to crack, okay, I just won't use it if I have a full graveyard, but if I'm going to lose the game because someone just cast Living Death with a full graveyard, I'm just going to pop it. I would rather lose my graveyard than lose the game.
Right.
So sometimes you just have to take that trade-off. There's a bunch of really good 1-mana tutors out there that are particularly old, but you've got Gamble, and you have Worldly Tutor, Mystical Tutor, Vamp Tutor, Enlightened, Imperial Seal is 1 mana. I'm guessing you guys run multiples of those in multiple decks, and there's almost
maybe.
Yeah,
no point in
there's
the
a
game
small
good.
chance.
I don't run a ton. I don't run a ton of tutors in my decks, but I usually have 1 in most of my decks at least, maybe 2.
I think each of my decks runs at least one of the 1-mana tutors.
The one thing I tend to do with tutors is if I have a card that wins the game, I don't go. If I like a card that, if I found the deck has 1 target that I always go get, I don't run tutors, and if I don't, then I run tutors. Is that not a thing for you, Max?
No comment. I plead the 5th.
Well, I felt like I can't resist the temptation. Like I had a demonic tutor in my Kresh deck, and I was like, doubling season's my target every time. Why would I not go get doubling season and make this creature that was supposed to be a 12/12 when it came into play a 24/24, and then just kill somebody with a flame?
It's called self-control,
I guess. But then I feel like I'm intentionally making that's
bad
kind
decisions.
of insulting too. Where I'm like, I could kill you now with this really obvious spell, but I'm not going to do that. I don't like doing that either mentally. So I'd rather just under the temptation. I just won't run the tutor.
I may have at least 3, maybe 4 ways to go get Blood Bond and RNK.
Okay.
Just saying.
Right.
I don't like to, but game's got to end.
Well, and that's true. It's also like, hey, we're on turn 17 here, and it's been an hour and a half.
I would just kill everybody.
I don't mystical tutor for Approach of the Second Sun or anything.
You don't use long-term plans to go get it and put it 2 down. I guess that wouldn't count as a 1 or 2 drop here, or 0 or 1 drop here, but. I don't have any of the green tutors. I noticed. I went through and checked my decks. I have none of the green tutors in any of my decks. No Worldly, no Sylvan. I guess Green Sun's Zenith technically, but that not really, because you're always paying the X unless you're going to get a Dryad Arbor. And I do have one of those because I use in my Edric decks. I run in Dryad Arbor, but other than that, I don't run Worldly in any of my decks.
The downside with Worldly, unlike the other ones, is if you're in mono green, it's hard to get that draw right away.
Yeah.
So if you do it during your turn and you stack your deck so that creature's on top and you have no way to draw it, that's just a downfall. That's why I cut it out of Jamoka. And then I went to like Eldamri's Call, which is a 2-drop, but that still was like, everybody knows I just went and got Baneslayer, or I just went and got Selfless Spirit. You know, I'm showing my hand, and I just didn't like that.
For me, what it wound up being with those was none of my creatures are anything that makes the game, that changes things in the game enough that it mattered. Like, what am I going to go get in Reki?
I'm surprised you don't play a Worldly Tutor in Sigarda.
No, he plays Enlightenment.
I run Green Sun Zenith so I can put it straight into play. Because the target is almost always going to be Argothian Enchantress, generally
one
speaking.
of the Enchantresses.
And Enchantress, and I can just put it straight into play and then start playing things.
Yep.
So because they're so cheap, if I was going to get maybe a Crater Hoof or something where it would cost me 10 to tutor up, then I would maybe do it because I just put it on top and I could cast it. But Green Sun Zenith is easier in that deck because Enchantresses are so cheap. I can just go grab them and put them straight into play. But yes, that's the one. That's the one place I run one into is Green Sun Zenith, which is also, I guess, an Edric as well, where I go get Dried Arbor.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Vamp is as good as Demonic. I mean, or close enough to it. Those are definitely, I think, the powerhouse ones. Do you have Enlightened in Tuvasa?
I have Enlightened in Tuvasa. I think I've Enlightened in every one of my white decks except Brago.
Oh, I do have it in Jeru because it's worth sometimes to go get Chain Veil. I either tend to go
That
get
makes sense.
Chain Veil or something that I can draw cards with. Go get Mind's Eye or go get Stephanin or go get what's the new artifact? The two-mana artifact you spend 2 to tap to draw a card. If you control 3 or more lands with the same name.
Endless Atlas.
There we go, Endless Atlas. I've actually gotten Endless Atlas with it before too.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. I have it in every one of my decks but Dramoka.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah.
although True Conviction in that deck might be worth going to get sometimes. But
Sylvan Library. I mean, any of them would
Yeah,
be fine.
I just don't have a 4th copy. Like it was.
That's true,
I
yeah.
would rather because Enlightened Tutor in Brago gets me my mana rocks. Worst case scenario, if I need to get the engine
Yeah.
going, I can go get Mana Crypt or
Sure.
Monolith. Where in Dramoka, I don't have a lot of mana rocks.
well, yeah, right, like,
flex a little bit there.
It's the one time I can in my life.
that's true. There's a bunch of busted removal spells at 1 mana. Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, Rubber Hybridization, Pongify. There's a couple of alt casting ones. Like there's a Murderous Cut. No,
Yep.
Murderous Cut. There's some good 0-drop removal spells too. I mean, the first 4 I mentioned, Swords, Path, Pongify, Hybridization, I think I run all of those in any decks that can run them. Every white deck I have has Swords and Path.
Yeah.
I think the only one, I think my blue deck that doesn't have Pongify and Rapid Hybridization is my Althorius deck that also has access to
Yeah.
Swords and Path.
Because white's just better removal.
Yeah. So I don't need like 4 creature removal spells in those decks. I just run the 2. And I think Reality Shift, which is a 2-drop, but that kind of muscles out those 2. But I mean, that's it took me a little while to realize that in my Dimir deck. I'm like, oh man, the 2 blue removal spells are better than black's creature removal spells. 1 mana, and I don't care if I give you a 3/3 Frog Lizard that you put a dice down and then forget you had. Like that, I've seen that happen so many times. Someone's like, oh, okay, I got a 3/3, and they don't put an actual token out. They put a dice out, kind of off to the side, and then like 4 turns later, they're like, oh, I have this Frog Lizard here I forgot about. Like I wasn't going to remind you had it.
How can you forget that? Especially when it's your board state.
Right,
I can
right,
understand
right,
someone else's
right.
board state, but your own, you should remember that.
I'm not good at Magic.
There's some really good cheap equipment that only costs 0 or like a Quarter Shield, just Trusty Machete. Are there any of those that you guys have in your decks?
No.
I don't really run equipment.
I think those tend to show up in equipment decks for
Well-
the most part.
The one I do run right now is Helm of the Gods in Tuvasa.
Was that a 1-drop?
It's a 1-drop and 1 to equip, and it's essentially Ethereal Armor
Yep.
minus the first strike. It's getting replaced with one of the new cards from Throne of Eldraine that's essentially the same thing, but it
Yep.
doesn't have the equip cost.
Okay.
It's a white enchantment.
And that will draw you then enchantment
Right.
off an
So much
enchantress.
for being a theme deck. Playing artifacts
It
in
says
there.
aura on it. Equip enchantment. See, it says enchantment on the
Oh,
card.
he's replacing it anyway, so like he's solving the problem.
I'm solving the
With
problem.
another one.
Right. Well, no,
With
it's
an
an aura.
enchantment,
With
though.
an
Oh, it's an
enchantment.
It is an aura.
enchantment.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a 1 white enchantment. It's Ethereal Armor minus the first strike. Right? Because
Yeah.
who needed more of those?
Okay, so those are the rough categorization I came up with. You mentioned auras, Max. Like Ethereal Armor is a great one drop at almost any point in the game. Matter of fact, the longer the game goes, the better that one drop gets. Flickering Ward is kind of the same way in an Enchantress deck.
I actually have. Did you mention Basilisk Collar?
I didn't. Well, that's a good one among your equipment.
Equipment? That's a solid one drop equipment.
I scrolled down a little bit farther, and yes, I do run a one drop equipment in a deck.
Basilisk Collar?
Skull Clamp.
I totally
Very
forgot
true.
about
Yeah.
that card.
We just asked a question about that on Twitter
We
last
did.
week.
Well, because I was looking at it for my Vela deck, and I was like, why am I not running this in the deck? And then it's like, well,
It's
then
not good enough.
Well, then I thought, well, I should just ask on Twitter. So then I went to put it in my deck, and I'm like, oh, there it is. It was already in the deck. I just hadn't drawn it in 2 months. I just haven't seen it.
It's so much fun to play an Imperial Recruiter, suit him up, attack with
Yep.
Alesha, bring him back, suit him up. It's just like,
Yep.
get some.
Bloodforged Battle Axe.
Is that also one?
It's a 1 to cast and 2 to equip. And the fact that it makes copies of itself
Yeah.
is super good.
Yeah, that's a super cool card. That might wind up in our Sir Gwyn deck next
Very
week.
might-
We'll see. Okay, so
No. That's expensive.
okay, all right, yeah, probably. So that was what I came up with for categories, but there's still a lot of good one drops we can go over
There's
here.
tons. This is what I did. I went to Scryfall and figured out the
Yep.
syntax, less than CMC less than 2, Weagle and Commander minus lands because, we've talked utility lands like 4 shows now, essentially, in our entire catalog. I made it through the M's, just going A through Z, and I made it through the M's last night.
So what are some of the highlights, the ones that you like the best here?
Amulet of Vigor, right off the bat.
Lands coming to play untapped.
Hasty haste.
Yep.
Angel's Grace is a fun one if you really need to save. It's more of a late game thing. Authority of the Councils is one of my favorites.
Yeah. Again,
Temple hits.
At any point in the game, Authority of the Councils is good.
Yeah. One of, I think, all of our favorites is Berserk.
Yes.
Trash card.
Man, I think Berserk's underplayed. I know it's expensive now, and it's also kind of obscure. It's only had the one printing in like the last 20 years. But Berserk is fantastic.
Yeah. What else do I have? Claws of Gix. I've seen that a lot in our shop. Just a good sack outlet. Concordant Crossroads. That haste enabler when your mono green deck just needs to win.
Yeah.
It also gives your opponents haste. We don't do that here.
That's
we
why
don't
you
help
do it
our
when you
opponents.
win.
That's why you cast it and then just win.
I just want cast it turn to
I'll
one.
tell you this.
Chaos.
I've cast Concordant Crossroads probably 10 times in my Recce deck, and no one's ever seen it on
Help
their
them.
side of the field. It's never been put down in the field when anyone else can take advantage of it. It's just when I end the game.
We also have the best non-planeswalker in Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah.
There's a reason it's banned in every format.
Yep.
Engineered Explosives. That's a favorite of Dana's. That's a
Yes, it
token
is.
sweeper.
I actually I picked one up in Vegas because I was going to put it in my Vela deck. And
Doesn't that just destroy all your stuff too?
Vela triggers.
it's Vela triggers, but then I as soon as I played it, I was like, oh, I can't animate this because I actually then wanted. I played a card and I'm like, I want to animate it. I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going to play that.
What else do I have? For a budget-friendly protection spell, God's Willing is really good.
Yeah. Well, protection spells. You have Autumn's Veil and Veil of Summer.
Sounds right.
Or did I invert those? Is it Summer's Veil and Veil of Autumn?
I don't
They did
remember
it wrong.
now.
Oh, I know.
Whichever, they are wrong, and it should be named this part like a name cycle. Regardless, those are both fantastic cards.
Yep. Infiltration Lens is another equipment that costs 1 to cast and lets you draw some cards.
Yeah, Infiltration Lens in Boros is great.
Ooh.
And in if you've something like Aurelia that has the double combat phases baked into her, draw 4, discard 2 in Boros. That's fantastic.
Yeah. One of Chris's favorite when he had Ural put together, Instill Energy,
Yeah.
giving your creature haste in green for an aura.
And vigilance.
And vigilance. That's so good.
I just put it in my Sigarda deck. I've not seen it get it out. I've not got it out yet, but I just put it in my Sigarda deck.
I need to go digging through my bulk and put one into Vasa.
Nice.
And then a budget-friendly Sylvan library would be Miri's Guile.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's also not cheap, but it's
but
not as bad as
it's not
Sylvan
Sylvan
Library.
Library. And then one Dana you didn't talk about, and maybe because it's not that great in the late game, but Mystic Remora.
Yeah, it's on my list here. It's like in my generic list
Like-
of just good cards. It's great.
Yeah. And then my favorite is Meekstone.
Yeah, that screws a lot of people up.
I love Meek
Me
Stone.
too.
Yeah. It's also one of those cards I feel like, well, you can kind of be like, that's your fault for playing big creatures, my friend.
I'm sorry, I can blink all my stuff.
Yep. There's some really good one-drop counter spells. You have Flusterstorm, Swan Song, Stubborn Denial. The last two especially are ones I run. Flusterstorm, I think you have to be playing in a certain meta with a lot of counter spells going on the stack, CEDH mostly. But, I mean, in that environment, Flusterstorm's really, really good too. Burgeoning and Exploration. Less good in the late game, but I don't mind dropping them in my Enchantress deck late game for sure.
I actually just put an Exploration in Tuvasa
Okay.
for either early game ramp or late game just gives it a boost and draws
Yeah.
me a card.
If you happen to have two Enchantress out or three, then you're
Oh,
like,
darn.
absolutely, I'll drop that.
Yep.
Or a Nylea's Colossus.
Yeah. Carpet of Flowers is a really good draw spell in a really good ramp spell in a lot of decks. Although I have gotten burned by it before, but again, in an Enchantress deck, you're like, okay, well, there's nobody playing blue, but I'll still draw a card or two, or maybe even more, depending on what your Enchantress situation is. You very rarely ever cast it for one, but Vandal Blast, in a pinch, if you need to, cast it for one, kill an artifact. I mean, ideally you want to overload it for 5, but I have cast it for 1 before, and I've had it cast on me for 1 before.
Totally forgot it had something other than Overload.
Yeah. Let's see, Executioner's Capsule.
That
And
only works in like one deck.
it's really good in Glissa. I don't know if I would run it. Maybe like a Brea deck or something where you
Yeah.
care about artifacts. Divining Top
Oh, yeah.
is really solid.
The Dirtle Machine.
Yep. A card I've been running in my Talran deck lately is a Retraced Image. It's a blue, a 1-mana spell. You reveal a card from your hand, then put that card onto the battlefield if it has the same name as a permanent. I do run it in my Talran deck because basically it lets me play an extra land for the turn. So I do like that as a blue 1-drop. Reconnaissance. Did you mention that? I can remember if you mentioned
I
it or
did not.
I know you
because
like Reconnaissance.
It got cut from Tuvasa.
Okay. It's still a really solid card.
Yeah.
Bad card. Who would ever play a card like that?
Me and you.
Hardened Scales.
You
You have to be playing in that deck. Like, it's not just a generically good card. You have to be in a counters deck.
have to be in a counters deck, but I feel like most counters deck, after, that card needs to really ramp up into it. Like, yeah, you could get board wiped and still have that out and drop like a hanger back for like 4, and so cool, it comes in with 5, but I feel like there's not enough reward of it.
You tend to
late game.
need something like if you're playing Vigor in a deck where it takes damage.
Oh,
where
gross.
like it scales up. It's really good in my Kresh deck, especially if I
Right.
happen to drop Deathbringer Thoctor, because
You go infinite.
you kind of go infinite with it, or at least you can wipe the entire board and you get further
Yeah.
and further ahead.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing. It's a great card. I just think in the late game, unless you have a way to exponentially benefit from that only one
Yeah,
more,
yeah.
I don't think it's that great.
If you're playing a deck that like your commander or something is the only thing that has counters on it, it
Yeah.
probably isn't worth just getting one extra counter. But there's also 2 white spells that get you lands to hand. That would be Land Tax and Tithe. They're better in decks that don't have green.
And they're better in the first 4 turns of the game.
Yeah, or if you have something that cares about cards in hand, for example, like there's been plenty of times in my
Conflagrate.
Azorius,
Yeah.
my Azorius deck, where like if I've got a scroll rack out, I absolutely want to grab 3 lands with Land Tax or grab
True.
2 with Tithe. So that there is a lot of additional synergy there for sure, and it's a free shuffle in those cases as well, which isn't irrelevant sometimes if you're running that brainstorm we mentioned earlier. Any from you, Chris, you want to throw out here quick?
The wonderful 1-mana enchantment that I talk about all the time in Phyrexian, Reclamation.
Oh yeah, that's really good.
Pay 1 colorless, 1 black, 2 life, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just awesome. Now, I went deep in this because I mistook what we were talking about for
Okay.
this show. And I went to very obscure cards.
Well, what do you got? That's good.
Okay, well, let's start from the top. And this one could be a replacement for Heroic Intervention.
Okay.
It's called Avoid Fate.
Yeah.
Oh, it's from Legends.
1 mana, green. Counter target instant or aura spell that targets a permanent you control.
And I think that may even have Oracle text on it that says, like, creature you control now has hexproof. No, it doesn't. It's the Oracle text says counter target instant or aura spell that targets a permanent you control. So,
But if I'm doing the math in my head, roughly, I'm going to say 80% of targeted removal is instant
yeah,
speed.
for the most part, yes.
Yep. A good targeted removal. The other one I have that I got a kick out of this card because I really want to play this card now after reading it. It's called Drop of Honey.
Oh,
A 1 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, destroy the creature with the least power. It can't be regenerated. If 2 or more creatures are tied for the least power, you choose one of them. And then when there are no creatures on the field, you destroy Drop of Honey. But it's a green destruction spell that just sits on the field. And if you're playing green, you have all the big fatties. Especially in the late game, you have the biggest creatures. So you're just like, blam, oh, kill that one during my upkeep. And then kill that one during my upkeep.
and there's actually a white version of it from Time Spiral Block called Porphyrious Nodes, I believe.
Okay.
That's the same exact thing, but it's white as a 1-drop. Yeah, man, I've never seen Drop of Honey actually cast in a game because I think it's a super expensive
I was
card
gonna
now.
say, isn't it bonkers expensive?
Because I think because it's
No.
because reserve list out of Arabian Nights.
I did not bother looking at prices. I'm just like, this card looks awesome.
I would bet it's probably $1,000.
Oh, don't tell me that because I really want one.
Yeah, but the white one's cheap. The white version of it's dirt
Okay.
cheap. So
But I
that's-
wanted it for green.
Yeah,
because I
right,
don't ever
yeah.
play green decks. So
Yeah, it is not a cheap one. Is there anything else?
Go ahead.
I have one more. This one I'm not quite sure because I've always wanted to make combat tricks work
Okay.
in Commander, and it's called Camouflage. It's a 1 mana green instant. So now I'm just going to read the card as how I have it pulled up. It says, you may rearrange your attacking creatures and place them face down, revealing which is which only when blockers are declared. If this results in impossible blocks, such as a non-flying creature blocking a flying creature, illegal blockers cannot block this turn.
The Oracle text is also a mess. There's it's not one of those cards that cleaned up in the Oracle
No.
text. The Oracle text may have made it worse, like Animate Dead.
Oh Lord.
I've always wanted to make something like that work, and I was looking through all the 1-drops, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to get one of these, and I'm going to try it.
Nice. Talking about stuff from the graveyard, Entomb
Yes.
is almost always a really, really useful
Reanimate works just as well.
spell. Yep. Yeah, Reanimate's also great at most points in the game as a 1-drop.
I'll go the opposite of bringing stuff back from your graveyard with Noxious Revival and Reclaim. Granted, it puts it
yeah.
on top of your library, but
Yep.
those are both 1 and 0 drops if you're willing to pay the 2 life for Noxious Revival.
And what the beauty of Noxious Revival and why it does see a bit of CDH play, being able to put something from someone else's graveyard on top of their library. I think Modern does that plenty too.
Yep.
Toss that fetch land on top when somebody goes to do something to buy yourself a turn to keep them from drawing gas is a huge play at times. If not, maybe the play. Like in some situation, I think that is maybe you might use it more for that than you use it to bring something back.
I have seen a guy playing against a mill player. I don't remember what deck he was playing, but he had Noxious Revival. The mill player milled him out, goes past the turn. He's like, during your end step, I will cast Noxious Revival, pay 2 life, put a card on top of my library, draw that card during my turn, and kill you. I was like, oh, get some.
I have in the past hit my own artifact or enchantment, whatever it was, with a deglamour to shuffle it into my empty library after getting milled out to buy myself a turn. I think I still died, but
Yep.
I bought myself a turn. So that stuff
I ain't
can make a
going out like
difference.
this.
Absolutely, yeah. So given the sheer amount of these 0 and 1s out there, I'm sure we missed some pretty cool ones that people actually play. If you want to reach out to us and let us know which ones we may have missed, absolutely do that, because I think when you search Max, there was like over 2,000 0 and 1 drops in the game.
Something close to that, yeah.
Yeah. So
I read through all of them today, and there are, yes, I spent all day doing this.
I know, we were talking about
There were
it.
a lot of them that are really good, but they're really situational.
yeah. Well, and like we didn't even touch on Red Elemental Blast and
Yep.
Pyroblast are both great in red. And there are situations like if you're playing in a small meta where you see the same decks every week. Even in blue, I would maybe run Blue Elemental Blast and Hydro Blast if you always play with your same friend who always plays a red deck. Those are perfectly good cards in that situation. So yeah, there's just a ton of these out there. And I really like the flexibility of having at least a couple of these in all of my decks.
Oh, and now Painter Servant's unbanned, so you can play those more often.
That's true. If you want to do that, yeah, there you go.
Oh.
Yes.
I remember when it first got unbanned, I'm like, oh, I could try that in my Vela deck. And I'm like, wait, that's not good. That's like a non-ball in that deck where I want to swing with unblockable creatures because they're colorless. Doesn't quite work for me. But, yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with those. All right, I think that is going to wrap it up. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. Our show is edited by Ken Peddle. You can find him online at LOAD3R. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR_Max. You can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. We'll be back with Deck Tech on Thursday. Till then, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.